My mother slapped me in front of 60 guests, screamed, "Get out of my house," and forgot I was the one paying the mortgage. So I made one phone call and let her find out on a Friday. My mother's hand hit my cheek so hard the string quartet missed a note. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Not the pain, the pause. The cellist's bow stuttering mid-phrase. One single wrong note hanging in the warm June air like a question nobody wanted to answer. Then silence. The kind that has weight. 60 people stood across that manicured lawn. Champagne flutes frozen mid-air. Conversation dead. Even the fountain. The marble one she'd had installed the year after my father died. The one that had to keep running because a dry fountain tells people everything. Even that seemed to hold its breath. My palm went to my cheek on instinct. I felt the heat before I felt anything else. My mother stood 3 feet away in a $4,600 sea glass designer dress. A dress I had paid for without her knowing. Routed through a personal shopper she thought my father's estate had retained. She was shaking, not with remorse, with fury, because 60 people were staring at her, because something had gone wrong at her perfect party, because I had, by existing in the wrong moment near the wrong person, made her look bad, in front of the only audience she'd ever truly cared about. "Get out," she said. Her voice dropped low the way it always did when she meant it, then louder, sharp and clear across the lawn, so every single person with a champagne flute could hear, "Get out of my house!" I looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. I counted, then I put my hand down, straightened my shoulders, and walked, past the fountain, past the lemon trees she had planted when I was 9, past the bartender who stared very hard at the glass he was polishing, past 60 people who looked away one by one as I reached them, like I was the embarrassing thing and not the woman in sea glass silk who had just struck her adult daughter in front of a string quartet. I did not run. I did not cry. I got in my car, sat in the driver's seat for 90 seconds with the engine off, and then I drove home, and I started making phone calls. Let me back up. Because for this to land the way it needs to, you have to understand what 7 years looks like when you've spent them holding someone else's life together with your bare hands. My father, Gerald Whitmore, died on a Thursday morning in October. He went quietly. Cardiac event, no warning, gone before the paramedics arrived. I was 31 years old and in the middle of a conference call when my mother rang my cell. I excused myself from the call, walked into a bathroom stall, and let my father be dead for about 4 minutes. Then I dried my face, walked back into the conference room, and finished the meeting. Because that is who I am. That is who I have always been. My father had been careful with money his whole life. He was an engineer, a methodical, patient man who believed that security was something you built slowly and quietly. He left a modest estate, a paid-off life insurance policy, retirement savings, a house with 11 years still on the mortgage. What he did not leave was enough to sustain the life my mother believed she was entitled to. Evelyn Whitmore had grown up with money, married money, and operated on the unspoken assumption that money was simply the natural atmosphere of her existence, like oxygen, like gravity, something that was simply there. She had never balanced a checkbook, never opened a bank statement. My father had managed everything, and when he died, she looked at me the way a person looks at a life raft. I was her only child. I was a senior financial analyst at Langford Capital, a firm most people in our city recognized by the building. I earned well. I had savings. I had no debt. And I made a decision, in those first horrible weeks after my father's funeral, that I have spent 7 years quietly regretting and stubbornly refusing to undo. I decided she would not lose anything. Not the house, not the club memberships, not the marble fountain, not the car, not the staff, not the dinners and the dresses and the social architecture she had spent her whole adult life constructing. She would not lose the life because it would have broken her, and she was my mother, and my father would have wanted, well, it doesn't matter what my father would have wanted. What matters is what I did. I opened 3 accounts. I set up automatic transfers. I called her mortgage company and set up direct debit from an account they would never connect to her name. I handled the country club dues quarterly, car lease monthly, 2 credit cards I monitored but kept current, a household account for staff, the housekeeper, the gardener, the marble fountain service and maintenance contract. I told no one. My mother never asked. I think she genuinely believed at some level that the estate was handling things, that Gerald had been more careful than anyone knew, that his love for her had been structured into accounts she didn't need to understand. She was not stupid. Evelyn Whitmore is one of the sharpest social strategists I have ever observed, but she had never, not once in her 64 years, been required to understand money. So she didn't. She spent it. She thanked no one. She kept the fountain running. By the time of the garden party, 7 years, 3 months, and 11 days after my father died, I had paid $812,000 of my own money to keep Evelyn Whitmore's world exactly as she had always known it. She had never said thank you, because she did not know. The garden party was for the Harrington Foundation Gala Planning Committee, 30 members plus spouses, a catered affair, past appetizers, an open bar, a string quartet, and my mother had organized it because she had organized it every year for the last decade, and because being the woman who organized it was, in her mind, a professional credential more important than any degree. I had been invited. I came. I wore something acceptable, and I stood near the fountain and I smiled at the right people. I don't know what set her off. I have tried to reconstruct the sequence, and I cannot. I know I was speaking with Ava Moreno, the catering manager, a warm, efficient woman in her 40s who ran a company called Moreno Events, and who was, as far as I could tell, doing an impeccable job. I know my mother appeared at my elbow. I know she said in the brittle voice she reserved for moments of social surveillance, having a conversation with the help. I turned to look at her. I said something. I don't remember exactly what. Something reasonable, something that would have landed differently on a different day with a different person. Maybe I said that Ava was not help. She was the reason the party was running smoothly. Maybe I said it slightly too evenly. Maybe it was just that I said it in front of people. And her hand moved. 60 people. The string quartet, the champagne, the fountain, the note they missed. That Monday morning, I arrived at my office at 7:45 a.m. I made coffee. I opened my laptop. I reviewed 3 reports. At 9:03 a.m., I called Jonathan Hale, my private banker at Caldwell Trust. Jonathan had managed my personal accounts for 11 years. He is 47, methodical, deeply unflappable, and the only person outside of a forensic accountant who knew the full scope of what I had been doing. Jonathan, I said, I need to cancel everything. A pause. Everything meaning every account connected to Evelyn Whitmore. Mortgage, direct debit, country club, car lease, both credit cards. The household account. Another pause. Longer. Claire. He used my name carefully, the way he did when he was about to say something he'd already thought through. You want to process all of this today? Today. The mortgage payment cycle's Friday. If we pull the direct debit now, they'll miss this month's payment. Yes. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone slightly cold. That's correct. He was quiet for 3 more seconds. Then, all of it? Every account connected to Evelyn Whitmore. He processed the instructions while I was on the phone. It took 11 minutes. When it was done, he sent me a confirmation email at 9:22 a.m. with a summary of the 12 accounts that had been closed, modified, or flagged for termination. 12. I had not counted them before that moment. 12 separate financial lifelines running invisibly for 7 years, and she had walked through them every single day without looking down. By Friday, the car was gone. She left me a voicemail. Her voice was doing something I had only heard it do twice before. A controlled shake, like she was holding something very heavy at arm's length. They came and took it, Claire. They came. They took it from the driveway. A breath the neighbors saw. I listened to it once. Then I got dressed and went to work. Her lawyer showed up on a Tuesday. 10 in the morning, unannounced, which told me everything about how rattled she actually was, because Evelyn Whitmore would have preferred to die than appear unplanned. His name was Arnold Price, 62, silver-haired, navy suit with a pocket square that matched nothing accidentally. He'd been practicing estate law in this city for 30 years, and he carried himself like someone who had won enough quiet battles to stop announcing them. He had a leather folder. He set it on my conference table without opening it. Your mother, he said, believes there may have been irregularities in the management of your late father's estate. I looked at him. She believes, he continued, with the very deliberate pacing of a man choosing words the way a surgeon chooses instruments, that funds which should have been administered through the estate were redirected. Redirected, I repeated, withheld from her, as surviving spouse. Mr. Price, I said his name quietly. My father's estate was settled in full 14 months after his death. My mother received everything she was legally entitled to under the terms of his will and the applicable state statutes. I have copies of every document, signed and filed, if you'd like to review them. His expression didn't change. There is a question of ongoing funds. Yes. I reached under the conference table and lifted a binder onto the surface. Black cover, 2-inch spine, tabbed sections, each labeled with a year. There is. I slid it across the table. He opened it. The first section was 2017. Monthly statements, line itemized transfers, mortgage payment, country club dues, car lease debit, credit card settlements, service contracts. He turned a page. He turned another. I watched his eyes move across the columns. He had been doing this for 30 years, and men like him don't perform surprise. They are trained out of it the way surgeons are trained out of flinching. But something shifted in the architecture of his posture. Subtle. A 1/4 inch of adjustment in the shoulders. He went back 2 pages, then forward again, then back. These payments, he said, and his voice was slower now, the way speech goes when the brain is working hard behind it. All from your personal accounts? Yes. She had no legal claim to these funds. None. Was there any written agreement between you and your mother? Any promissory note, loan arrangement, gift documentation? No. He looked at the binder. He closed it halfway. He opened it again. The gesture of a man hoping the numbers might rearrange themselves into something more useful for his client. They did not rearrange. He closed it fully, set his hands flat on the cover. I see, he said. The room was quiet, except for the ventilation system and the faint sound of someone's assistant typing in the hallway. Mr. Price, I said. My mother screamed at me to leave her house in front of 60 witnesses on Saturday afternoon. The house whose mortgage I have been paying for 7 years. I would like you to take that binder back to her and explain to her carefully what the word beneficiary means versus the phrase my daughter was paying for this. He picked up the binder. He set it in his leather folder. He snapped it shut. He slid his card across the table, cream stock engraved, and stood. I'll be in touch, he said. I know, I said. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I was still sitting at that conference table, eating a sandwich I'd ordered and hadn't touched for an hour, when my cell rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me answer. Is this Claire Whitmore? A woman's voice. Warm, slightly cautious. Yes, this is Ava Moreno, from Saturday. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened. No one should be treated that way. She paused, and I could hear her measuring what came next. And I also thought you should know. Your mother has refused to pay our invoice. My sandwich sat on the table, untouched. She says our staff caused a disturbance, Ava continued. That the incident was, her word was provoked by our team's placement near the family during the event. I set down the pen I'd been holding. Ms. Whitmore, Ava said carefully. We had a setup camera positioned near the fountain. It's part of our standard walkthrough. We use it to document layout for post-event review. It wasn't intended to capture anything personal. I already knew what was coming. I felt it settle in my chest like a stone dropping through cold water. It captured everything, she said. I looked up. Arnold Price had not yet left the building. I could see him through the glass wall of the conference room, speaking with my assistant, collecting his coat. Ms. Moreno, I said, can you send that footage to me? Yes, I wanted to ask first. address. Send it to me. I was already on my feet moving toward the door, and I need you to send a copy to a second address. His name is Arnold Price. He's an attorney. I pushed the door open. Mr. Price. He turned. His coat was half on. His expression was the professional neutral of a man who has seen many strange things and classifies them all. I need your email address, I said. You're about to receive something you should see before you advise your client any further. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached back into the leather folder and produced a second card, this one with a handwritten email on the back. He held it out. I took it. I read the address aloud to Ava, still on the line. Are you sure? She said. Send it, I said. To both of us. Tonight. The file arrived at 6:47 p.m. Video. MP4. High angle. The timestamp from Moreno Events setup documentation in the bottom right corner. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a glass of water I didn't drink, and I pressed play. No audio for the first few seconds. Just the lawn, the fountain, the pristine white tents, the guests in summer dresses and linen blazers arranging themselves across the green. The fountain caught the afternoon light and broke it into small pieces. My mother moved through the frame in her sea glass dress, working the crowd the way she always worked a crowd. Gracious, deliberate, controlled. Then the audio synced. Her voice was clearer than I expected, sharper. The camera was positioned closer to the fountain than I'd realized, and she had been standing directly in its sightline. Having a conversation with the help, I watched myself turn. I watched my own face, expression open, not angry, genuinely just surprised. I watched myself say something. On camera it was brief, 3 or 4 seconds. Then her hand moved. The slap sounded different on video. Smaller somehow, sharper. The way something sounds when the surrounding space removes all the softness. No ambient noise to absorb it, just the crack of her palm against my cheek, and then briefly the cellist's bow stuttering. I watched 60 people stop moving. I watched myself press my palm to my face. I watched my mother's expression. And this is the thing I had not seen in the moment, because I was standing too close. I watched her face in the half second after. There was no horror, no immediate contraction of the features that signals a person who has surprised themselves. There was something else, a tightening. The face of someone recalibrating because a result had not landed the way they expected. She had hit me because she expected me to crumple, and I hadn't. And that made it worse. Then I watched myself walk, past the fountain, past the trees, past the bartender, past 60 people who looked away as I reached them. I had thought, in those first days after Saturday, that I had looked weak in that footage, diminished. A woman who had been struck and simply left. But watching it back, in my kitchen, alone with my water glass and my untouched laptop, and 7 years of financial records in a binder I had built page by page, I saw something different. I didn't look weak. I looked done. There is a difference. Most people have never been done enough to know what it looks like. It looks quiet. It looks straight-backed. It looks exactly like someone who has already made every decision that needs to be made, and is now simply implementing them. I watched myself walk out of frame. Then I closed the laptop. Arnold Price sent his email the following morning at 8:14 a.m. No letterhead, no formal salutation, just his personal email account and 2 paragraphs. Ms. Whitmore, having reviewed the documentation provided at our meeting in conjunction with the video documentation received last evening, I must advise you that there is no legal basis for continued claims against your accounts, assets, or estate decisions. I have communicated this to my client. I have also advised Mrs. Whitmore to resolve all outstanding vendor invoices at her earliest opportunity. Beneath that, in a different font, scanned, not typed, a single handwritten line. I am sorry for your time. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it. The mortgage company, the country club membership office, the car dealership, every institution that had called me over the years, not often, but occasionally, when a payment had been close to the wire. Every number I had called at least once in 7 years on her behalf. They deserved to see it. They deserved to know who had actually been in the room. 3 weeks later, I received a call from a journalist named David Cho at the city's local business paper. He was writing a piece on a pattern of billing disputes at high-end catering companies, vendors being stiffed by event hosts who blamed staff for disruptions to avoid paying invoices. Ava Moreno had spoken to him. He had the video. He asked me if I wanted to comment. I thought about it for a while. Yes, I said. One thing. What's that? The house where the party was held. Print the address. He paused. Why? Because she bought it from my father's estate, and I paid the mortgage for 7 years, and the city's property records are public. I let that sit. People in that neighborhood know that house. They know her. I think they'd find the context interesting. David Cho published the piece 11 days later. It ran with one photograph, a still from Ava's setup footage, cropped to show only the aftermath. 60 guests, motionless, champagne flutes suspended, and my mother's face in that half second after the slap, wearing an expression the caption described as apparent anger. The country club received 17 complaints about her membership in the following week. She was asked, in the careful diplomatic language these institutions reserve for requests they cannot legally demand, to take a leave of absence from the gala planning committee, voluntarily, to allow the situation to settle. She did not call me. I did not call her. The fountain at the house on Alderton Lane stopped running 2 months after the party. The service contract had been in my name. When I canceled it, maintenance stopped. I don't know how long it sat dry before she noticed. I don't know who she called. I don't know if she stood in front of it and understood, in some part of herself she'd never had to access before, exactly what a dry fountain tells people. I didn't ask. I want to be careful here, because I know how this kind of story is supposed to end. The villain loses everything. The protagonist rises. Some piece of poetic symmetry closes the loop, and you go to bed satisfied. Here is what actually happened. My mother is 64 years old. She is selling the house on Alderton Lane. It was listed 6 weeks ago, and I have not seen the listing because I have not looked for it, but 2 people who know us both have mentioned it to me. in the careful way that people mention things they think you might not know. She has, according to the same careful mentions, moved into a smaller property closer to her sister. She has not been at the last 3 events where we might have encountered each other. I do not know if this is deliberate. I have had 6 sessions with a therapist named Dr. Patricia Louvel, who has a practice on the 4th floor of a building I pass on my commute. She is 60, direct, and does not use the word closure. She uses words like reorientation and grief that skipped a step. She suggested in our 4th session that I may have been paying my mother's bills not only out of love or loyalty or even a desire to honor my father's memory, but out of a learned belief that if I kept everything standing, if I held up every wall, if nothing ever fell, then I would be safe. I did not argue with her. I'm not sure she's wrong. What I know is this. I paid $812,000 over 7 years to maintain a life that was not mine, for a woman who hit me in front of 60 people and told me to leave. I did not do it for gratitude. I did not do it for acknowledgement. I did not do it consciously for leverage. But when she swung her hand and that cellist missed a note, when 60 people froze and the champagne stopped and the fountain kept running because the only reason it ever kept running was me, something shifted that I could not have shifted on purpose. Something went done. I called Jonathan Hale that Monday and canceled 12 accounts, and it felt like setting down something very heavy that I had been so accustomed to carrying. I'd stopped noticing the weight. I noticed it now. My shoulders are different. That probably sounds absurd, but it's the most accurate thing I can tell you. I carry myself differently than I did 7 years ago, or even 8 months ago. I walk into rooms and I do not immediately calculate what I might be required to hold up. The fountain is dry. A dry fountain tells people everything. It told them this, that nothing is permanent, that was only ever sustained by one person's silence, that the performance of a life is not the same thing as a life, that the woman in the sea glass dress never had what she thought she had, because what she had was a daughter who had quietly decided to give it to her, and that daughter, one warm June afternoon, quietly decided to stop. I did not need to destroy her. I just needed to put the binder on the table. The truth did the rest. I hired an actor to pretend to be my boyfriend for a family 4th of July party where my ex was bringing the woman he left me for. But what my fake date did to him left everyone speechless. The moment I understood something had broken inside me, really broken, not just cracked, was when I apologized to a man I'd known for less than 4 minutes for the traffic on the 405. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me from the passenger seat the way you look at something you weren't expecting to find, the way you look at a spider in a bathtub, not with disgust, but with a kind of slow, careful recognition, like, oh, so that's what this is. His name was Daniel. I'd found him 2 days earlier on a website called Actor for Hire and paid $280 for 4 hours of his time. His bio said he specialized in social scenarios requiring emotional intelligence. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't care. I needed a human being who looked like he had chosen me, and I needed him by 3 o'clock on the 4th of July, and I needed Ryan to see us walk through that gate together. I told myself it wasn't about revenge. I was lying. Let me back up. My name is Maggie Callahan. I'm 38 years old. I live in a 3-bedroom house in Thousand Oaks, California, with my 2 kids, Nora, who is 7, and Cooper, who is 9. I drive a 2019 Honda Pilot with a cracked left taillight I keep meaning to fix. I work as an office manager at a pediatric dental group on Moore Park Road, which means I spend most of my week sorting insurance denials and making sure the waiting room smells like bubble gum and not like fear. I was married for 11 years. I say it was like it's something that happened to someone else, like a weather event, like I read about it in the news. Ryan and I met when I was 26 at a friend's backyard barbecue, not unlike the one I'm about to describe. He was funny and certain of himself in that particular way that feels like safety when you're young and doesn't reveal its other face until much later. We bought a house. We had the kids. We built a life the way you build anything. One ordinary day stacked on top of another until suddenly you've got something real and complicated and yours. I thought it was ours. 3 months before that 4th of July, Ryan stood in our kitchen at 7:15 in the morning. I was packing Cooper's lunch. Nora was watching cartoons. He stood in the doorway in his work clothes, the gray button-down I had ironed the night before, and he said, "Maggie, I need to say something." I put down the sandwich. "You're not the woman I married," he said. "You used to take care of yourself. You used to be slim. You've let yourself go, and I'm just not attracted to you anymore." I remember the refrigerator hum. I remember the cartoon voices from the living room. I remember thinking, he is saying this at 7:15 in the morning while Nora watches cartoons in the next room. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I asked him if there was someone else. He paused just long enough for me to already know the answer. Then he said her name, Lucille, his secretary, 29, thin in the way that seems effortless and probably isn't. She had been to our house for a Christmas party 2 years earlier and complimented my brisket and borrowed my lip balm and left a chapstick-shaped imprint on my guest bathroom counter that I had cleaned up without thinking twice about. Within 6 weeks of moving out, Ryan was taking her everywhere. Restaurants, work events, his company's spring gala, his cousin's wedding, which I was not invited to, despite having been the one who remembered his cousin's birthday for a decade. He posted photos, not obsessively. That would have been easier to dismiss. He posted them the way you post something you're proud of. A new car, a promotion, a life upgrade. And then his mother called. Elaine Callahan is 71 years old and sharp as a tack and absolutely not the kind of woman who allows her family to fracture without doing something about it. She has been hosting the 4th of July pool party at her house in Simi Valley for 22 2 consecutive years. Same backyard, same oak tree, same photo spot. She called me on a Tuesday evening in late June. "You're coming," she said. It wasn't a question. "Elaine, he's bringing her." A pause. The particular silence of a woman choosing her words carefully. "And I want you there. The kids should be there. You belong in this family, Maggie. Don't let him push you out of places where you belong." I wanted to be brave. I told her I'd think about it. Then I got off the phone and sat in my car in my own driveway for 40 minutes. And I thought about Ryan's hand on Lucille's waist and her red swimsuit and all those photographs. I thought about the way he'd said, "You've let yourself go," while I was packing our son's sandwich. I thought about the 11 years of dinners I'd made and school forms I'd filed and middle of the night fevers I'd managed alone because he had an early meeting. I opened my laptop. I typed, "Hire an actor for a social event." 3 seconds later, actorforhire.com. Daniel's profile photo showed a man in his mid-30s standing outside what looked like a theater, arms crossed, not smiling. Not in an unfriendly way, in a "I don't need to perform for a headshot" way. His reviews were specific and strange. Daniel was professional and kind during a genuinely awkward family dinner. He knew exactly when to speak and when to stay quiet, worth every penny. One review just said, "He figured out what was happening before I told him. That was the most helpful part." That last one was what made me book him. I sent a message through the site explaining the situation. I was more honest than I expected to be. I told him about Ryan, about the kitchen at 7:15 a.m., about Lucille, about Elaine's party, and the oak tree photo, and the 22-year tradition I was terrified of losing. I told him I had 2 kids who would be there, and that I needed him to be kind to them. That was non-negotiable. I asked if he could do 4 hours on the 4th of July for a pool party in Simi Valley. He replied in 20 minutes. "I can. Here's my rate. Call me tomorrow and we'll go over the details." We talked for 30 minutes. He asked questions I hadn't expected. Not logistical ones, but real ones. How long had I been divorced? What did the kids know? Was this person, Ryan, likely to be aggressive or just unpleasant? Had I attended any event since the separation, or was this the first time I'd be seeing him with her? I answered honestly. And when I told him about the kitchen at 7:15, there was a pause on the line, and then he said very quietly, "I understand what I'm walking into." 2 days later, he knocked on my front door at 2:45 p.m. He was tall, dark-haired, white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He had the kind of easy posture that suggests someone who has been comfortable in their own body for a long time. He looked like someone who belonged everywhere, which is exactly what I needed. I was standing on the porch in my blue sundress, the one I'd had for 3 summers and kept telling myself I'd replace. And the first thing out of my mouth was, "I'm sorry, I don't look like my photos anymore." He stopped. He looked at me. "You apologized before you introduced yourself." The embarrassment hit fast. "Sorry, I'm Maggie." Something moved in his expression at that second apology. Something that wasn't pity. It was more careful than pity. But he just held out his hand. "Daniel." We loaded the kids into the car. Nora immediately began interrogating him about his acting work. Had he played a superhero? A villain? A pirate? "A pirate," he confirmed. "Dental convention." "Pirates don't go to dental conventions," Cooper said. "This one had a really concerning relationship with sugar," Daniel said. The car filled with laughter. I gripped the steering wheel and watched Ryan's exit ramp approaching on the freeway sign and tried to remember how to breathe. I apologized for the traffic. Daniel didn't answer. He just watched the road. I apologized for the air conditioning making a clicking noise. Still quiet. When Nora pressed her hand against his window and left a full palm print, I started to reach for it automatically. "I'm so sorry about Maggie." His voice was even. "It's a window." I pulled my hand back. My face felt hot. Ryan's black truck was in the driveway when we pulled up. Beside it, gleaming like an accusation, was a white convertible I didn't recognize but understood immediately. My stomach dropped straight through the car seat. Daniel looked at me. "Ready?" I was not remotely ready. I nodded. We walked through the gate together, his hand loosely at the small of my back. Nora ran ahead. Cooper hung back with us, which he sometimes does when he senses something. Elaine's backyard was everything I'd spent 11 years expecting on the 4th of July. Pool shimmering in the afternoon light, red, white, and blue streamers, the smell of ribs and charcoal, familiar faces, cousins, neighbors, Ryan's brother Pete and his wife Linda, who hugged me so hard I felt her apology in the grip, and Ryan, standing by the grill with his hand on Lucille's waist like she was a prop he'd rented for the occasion. Red swimsuit, perfect hair. She was laughing at something, her head tilted back, and she was beautiful in the way that had probably felt like a statement to him. Look what I traded up to. He saw Daniel before he saw me. Then he saw me. His smile went through 3 distinct changes in about 2 seconds. First, the automatic hostility he'd been performing since I served him papers. Then something sharper, confusion, maybe, or a recalculation. Then, when his eyes moved to Daniel standing beside me, something that took me a moment to name. Alarm. He walked over. Lucille floated alongside him, graceful, performing ease. "Well," he called across the patio, loud enough for 4 separate conversations to pause. "This is interesting." He stopped in front of us and looked Daniel up and down the way men look at other men when they're deciding whether they need to be afraid. "Who's this?" he asked. "Daniel," Daniel said. His voice was perfectly calibrated, not aggressive, not deferential, conversational. "Maggie's boyfriend." Ryan laughed, not a real laugh, the kind deployed as a weapon. "Come on, Maggie." He looked at me with an expression I recognized from the last 2 years of our marriage, the one that said, "We both know the truth, don't we? You obviously paid him to be here." Every eye on that patio turned to me. I felt them land on my dress, my body, my face, the old dress, the post-children body, the face of a woman who apologizes before she speaks. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. My fingers slipped out of Daniel's. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I wasn't sure who I was apologizing to. I wasn't sure it mattered. It felt automatic. It felt felt like breathing. Daniel took my hand back. His grip was calm and certain. Don't be, Ryan smirked. Does the boyfriend package include hand-holding, or does that cost extra? The patio went quiet in a particular way. The way parties go quiet when something real is happening and everyone knows it and nobody wants to be the first to move. Daniel looked at Ryan, not with anger, not performing anything, just looked at him the way you look at something small that is trying very hard to seem large. Does the ex-husband package include humiliating the mother of your children in front of them? He said. Or do you do that for free? Someone gasped. I think it was Linda. Ryan's smile disappeared for the first time all afternoon. The party continued. Music, burgers, kids cannonballing into the pool. Ryan recovered, or tried to, retreating to the grill with heat, speaking a little louder than necessary, angling his body toward Lucille like a demonstration. I have this. Look at what I have. I did what I always do at large gatherings. I helped. I carried plates from the kitchen. Sorry, excuse me, coming through. I wiped the patio table after the kids finished eating. Sorry, sorry. When Ryan's Aunt Carol needed a refill, I got it before she had to ask. When someone knocked over a cup of lemonade, I was already reaching for the napkins before anyone else registered it had happened. Daniel watched me. He didn't say anything. He answered Nora's questions about whether Dental Pirate was his most prestigious role. He talked to Elaine, who clearly liked him immediately. He helped Cooper find his towel after it slid behind a deck chair, but he watched me. Nora spilled ketchup near his shoe. I was there in seconds, napkin in hand. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry here. It's ketchup, Maggie. I know, but it's ketchup. His voice wasn't impatient. It was the voice of someone naming a fact they want you to really hear. It'll wipe off. My hands were still shaking as I cleaned it. He watched that too. The family photo was Elaine's tradition, and she guarded it like a sacrament. Every 4th of July, same tree, same angle, same arrangement. 22 years of them lined up in frames down her hallway, a visual record of everyone growing and changing and occasionally disappearing from the frame. I had been in every photo for 15 years. Lucille positioned herself beside Ryan as Elaine organized everyone. Natural, proprietary, like she'd been there long enough to know her spot. Elaine pointed at the center chair under the oak tree. Maggie, sit here, sweetheart. I stepped back immediately, almost before the words were out of her mouth. No, someone else should sit there. I don't want to mess up the frame. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. The metal legs of the chair scraped across the patio. Loud, deliberate. Everyone turned. Daniel had pulled the chair toward me. His voice was quiet, but it had the quality of something that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. Why? He said. Is everyone else's comfort automatically more important than yours? I froze. I've been watching you today, he said. Every time something happened, traffic, your kids being kids, your ex-husband laughing at you in front of his entire family, you assumed it was your fault. You apologized for it immediately, before anyone asked. The back of my throat ached. People don't learn to apologize before they speak, he said, unless someone teaches them that taking up space is something they need to account for. Ryan shifted. I saw it in my peripheral vision. A weight transfer, like a man suddenly aware of the ground beneath him. She wasn't like that when we met, he muttered. Daniel turned to him. No. One word. The silence that followed it wasn't empty. It was full. It was everyone in that backyard doing the same mental arithmetic at the same time. She wasn't like that when we met. What happened in between? Ryan's son, Jake, 12, from Ryan's first marriage, a kid I had helped raise for 9 years, turned to look at his father with an expression that no 12-year-old should need to have, but some of them develop anyway. The expression of a child who has been keeping a mental inventory of small moments and has just understood all at once what those moments add up to. Ryan ordering for me at restaurants. She'll have the salad. She's watching her figure. Said cheerfully. Said in front of people. Said like a gift. Ryan at the dinner table, watching me serve. You know, Lucille was telling me she's been doing intermittent fasting, lost 15 pounds, and then looking at me, not saying anything else, not needing to. Ryan praising Lucille's body, her body in those words, at that table, while his kids ate dinner and I sat 3 feet away with a serving spoon in my hand. Jake was remembering all of it. I could see it happening. And then Lucille moved. She didn't make a scene. She didn't yell. She just slowly, quietly, lifted Ryan's hand from her waist. He frowned at her. What are you doing? She didn't answer him. She looked at me, not triumphant, not smug, not the way I'd been braced for her to look at me ever since this started. Frightened. She looked at me the way you look at someone when you've just seen something in them that you recognize in yourself. Do I apologize like that? She asked. Her voice was small. It wasn't directed at me exactly. It was the question a person asks when they're no longer sure who they're asking. Do I do that? That much? Ryan's face went a particular shade of pale. He didn't answer. His silence did. Lucille picked up her purse from the deck chair where she'd left it. She walked to the gate at the side of the yard, steady, purposeful. Ryan called her name once, then again, his voice going up slightly in a way I hadn't heard before, the particular pitch of a man who has not expected a consequence. She ran, not dramatically, just quickly. The gate swung shut behind her. Ryan stood at his mother's grill in his swim trunks and his certainty, and for the first time in the 11 years I had known him, he had absolutely no idea what to do. I sat in the center chair for the photo. Elaine put her hand on my shoulder before Nora's cousin pressed the button on the camera. Nobody asked Ryan to rearrange himself. He stood at the edge of the frame. The drive home was quiet in a good way, the kind of quiet that happens after a day that was a lot. Cooper fell asleep before we hit the freeway. Nora asked Daniel if they would see each other again. Maybe, he said, which was the kindest possible answer. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment after the engine died. Nora had drifted off. Daniel was looking out the window. I need to ask you something, I said. Okay. What you said. The thing about apologizing before you speak. I kept my eyes on the garage door. Did you say that because it's what the job called for? Or did you say it because it was true? He said, not unkindly. And because nobody nobody else was going to. I nodded. You know, he said, in 11 years, did anyone ever tell you that you were doing that? I thought about it. No, I said. I don't think I knew I was doing it. He nodded once. Then he gathered his things and got out, and very carefully did not slam the door because he could see Cooper was asleep. He gave a small wave through the window and walked to his car, which was parked at the curb. I sat in the driveway for another few minutes after his taillights disappeared. I don't know when I started crying. I know it wasn't dramatic. It was the quiet kind, the kind that comes from somewhere so deep that it's more like water finding a crack in stone than any kind of storm. Here is what happened afterward, for anyone who wants the tidy ending. Ryan texted me that night, 11:42 p.m. by the timestamp, to tell me that what I had done was humiliating and manipulative and beneath me. I read the message twice. Then I screenshotted it, forwarded it to my attorney, Shannon Park of Park Family Law in Woodland Hills, 12 years family law, 4 of those specifically domestic litigation, and put my phone face down on the nightstand. Shannon called me the next morning. We had been in the middle of mediation over the asset division and custody schedule, which had been, to put it gently, contentious. Ryan had been pushing for a 60-40 split in his favor, on the grounds that my emotional instability made extended custody challenging for the children. Shannon had been documenting everything. 2 days after the 4th of July, Elaine called me. She told me that Ryan's Aunt Carol had asked very directly why Ryan seemed angry that I had seemed happy. She told me that Pete had pulled Ryan aside and said something she hadn't been close enough to hear but could characterize by the color Ryan's face turned afterward. She told me that Jake, quiet, serious Jake, had started asking her questions about her marriage, about what makes a good husband, about whether it was normal to be scared of making someone upset. He's 12, she said. There was something in her voice I recognized as grief. He shouldn't be asking those questions, not yet. Jake started seeing a counselor in August, a man named Dr. Fitch, who specializes in adolescent family trauma and practices out of an office on Ventura Boulevard. I didn't arrange that. Elaine did. Ryan didn't argue. The mediation concluded in September. Shannon was very good at her job. The custody schedule ended up 50-50, which was what I had wanted from the beginning. The asset division was fair. Ryan's attorney had been building a narrative about my instability, but as Shannon pointed out in one particular session, calmly, with documentation, a woman who has been methodically trained to apologize for her own existence does not present as unstable. She presents as someone who has been managed. The word managed landed in that mediation room like a stone in still water. Ryan's attorney asked for a recess. I went back to therapy in August. My therapist is Dr. Renata Flores, who has a practice in Calabasas and more degrees on her wall than I can enumerate. She specializes in women recovering from long-term emotional manipulation, which is a phrase I had not applied to myself until I sat in her office and described my marriage out loud for the first time to someone who was not emotionally involved in it. The first thing she said after I finished was, "How often do you apologize in a day?" I laughed. "I don't know. A lot, I guess." "We're going to pay attention to that," she said. We did. We still do. I don't know what became of Lucille. I looked once in a weak moment and couldn't find anything on her socials that told me what I wanted to know, which I eventually understood was the wrong thing to want anyway. Her story is hers. What happened to her in that relationship is between her and her own therapist, if she found one. I hope she did. What I know is this. She saw something in me that she recognized, and she left before she'd spent 11 years learning what it was. Nora still asks about Daniel sometimes. Not often. The way kids ask about things that made them feel good. Casually. Without expectation. "Was he your boyfriend?" she asked me once in October, folding laundry together on a Sunday. I thought about it. "He was something better," I said. She seemed satisfied with that. Last month, Cooper had a school concert. I sat in the 3rd row. When he walked out on stage and found my face in the crowd, he waved. This enormous, unself-conscious wave. The kind kids do before they learn to play it cool. The woman next to me laughed. I did too. I didn't apologize for how loud I cheered. I didn't apologize for anything.